let's get some more reaction now. We're joined in conversation by the South African Communist Party General Secretary, Mapaila. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
You've come out of your CEC, and in your statement already you are condemning the utterances by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and you are strongly denouncing the actions of Israel. I mean, you are almost preempting a number of things. One, imperialist machinations. You're saying there will be sanctions, there will be economic blockades, combined with a lot of other propaganda in the media that is aimed at crippling the economies of attacked countries. Why?
It has already started here, as you can see. Gaza has been declared a no-go area by Israel, not by the people in Gaza, but by Israel, a foreign country. And in this regard, they have already cut electricity, water supplies. How are they expecting people to live without water, fuel and every other thing? And this is going to affect no less than 2.4 million people. So this is what it says in the script book of all countries that have been subjugated, particularly by American imperialism and its proxies. Israel is just one terrorist state, which is a proxy of the U.S., and it has been used to destabilize the Middle East region. For as long as Americans continue to prop up this terrorist apartheid Israeli regime, it will continue to terrorize the region, and there will never be peace in that particular region, because in every other conflict, Israel is involved.
Yeah. Israel says Palestine is not interested in a two-state arrangement. They want to annihilate Israel. They've shown with the 700 killed this past weekend that is their intention, and they want that classified as an act of terror.
The main terrorist is the Israeli state. It has been attacking Palestinian territories, occupying them, dividing Palestinian territories. If you take the map and see the extent of divisions that Israel has imposed on Palestinian territories, because it has the capacity to do so on the basis of international support, particularly from the Americans. And it has been using force all along. The people in the rest of Palestine have been terrorized on a daily basis by Israeli regime. So on this particular basis, there's no way in which you can even compare the things. They are incomparable, because those people in Gaza are in a permanent prison, controlled exclusively by Israel. It's Israel on this side, then is the sea. So they have nowhere to go. This is the consequence of this oppression of Israel, of the people in Gaza, even in West Bank, and other Palestinian territories. So the two-state solution that the Palestinian people have been seeking is becoming almost impossible. But yet it's still their dream. The Palestinians need self-determination, their own state, to rule themselves, not to have an imposed leadership on their communities. And this, unfortunately, has happened over the last 75 years, imposed by the so-called free world. And yet this free world values its own freedom, but doesn't value the freedom of others.
Well, why has the international community failed to even at this particular point come up with a strong statement around what is happening?
Because of the USA. The USA cajoles every other country. That is why, for instance, instantaneously after these attacks, Joe Biden instantly sent military warships with fighter planes on to go and actually protect Israel. What about the Palestinian people that have been condemned and brutalized on a daily basis over the years? No one cares for them, because their lives, according to imperialism, is not worth the life of, is not the same as the life of these imperialist forces and their proxy state, which is Israel. So all we are asking for is that let the Palestinian people be treated with humanity, be regarded as human beings. Israel, as we speak, has in its jails hundreds of Palestinian children, some below 10 years, who have been arrested. They can't have their life, they can't go to school, they can't do anything. Now, this barbaric response to this action are taken in hospitals, universities, residential buildings, indiscriminately killing women and children by a so-called legitimate state. On what basis do we accept this state terror? And it is in this regard that the United Nations, particularly the Security Council, had to have some teeth and draw a line where Israel should not cross at all.
Yeah. There are some in the Jewish community, at least the conversation I had yesterday, who are saying that if the SACP, if the ANC cannot condemn what happened in Israel on Saturday, then they've got no legitimacy to talk about even a two-state or even the apartheid regime of Israel, because they are supporting barbarism.
No, barbarism is the response of Israel. We are involved in our own revolutionary struggle here. How can the occupiers of your own land, of your own house, call you an aggressor when you defend yourself? No, there should be, that thing doesn't even arise. And that's where this logic should not even arise, because concomitantly, in fact, proportionately, Israel's attack on Palestine continuously on a daily basis, it's unimaginable, and it's never condemned. We have made many protests, we've made many marches. The United Nations is aware about this thing, has been discussing this thing, have resolutions after resolutions, but there's no implementation. And why there's no implementation? Because they have to back Israel. All the time Israel decides, no, here I can't do it. It defies United Nations resolutions, for instance. It continues to build new settlements in occupied territories of Palestine. The United Nations doesn't do anything. Why should we condemn Palestinians in their legitimate struggle for self-determination? That thing doesn't arise.
But is there justification for the kind of brutality that we saw? Kids being
killed at a concert.
I mean, I'm not saying that's not happened.
No, we're not talking about the justification. Yeah. We're not talking about the justification. We're not, in fact, that's a wrong platform to bring this question.
Yeah.
Because once we bring this question, we deal with the moment. We don't deal with reality of yesterday and the reality of tomorrow and the reality of today. I think the issue is that this matter is in the hands of Israel to restrain itself, yeah, and to withdraw and end the occupation of Palestinian territory. Then there will be peace, permanent peace. Why can't they accept that Palestinians have the right to live in their own country? There are millions of Palestinians who have since fled their own country. They can't go back. They are not allowed to go back. For them to go back, they must have the authority of Israel. So all these Palestinian people, exiles and so forth, should have the unconditional right of return to their own territory. And the old borders of Palestine must be respected by Israel. That's the only time we'll get peace in there.
So you're saying that the events of this weekend should not be looked at in isolation, must be looked at in the context of what's been happening there?
Yes, of course. They are completely interrelated. And in fact, this is one of the issues that even some of these groupings, particularly the Zionists, have been trying to justify this thing by trying to divide Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people themselves, when they were tackling this particular question, the issue has been, to what extent do we respond? PLO, which launched the first armed struggle and so forth, and struggle against the Zionist regime, have been in negotiations for years and years on behalf of Palestinian people. These negotiations are not being adhered to, despite agreements. President Arafat even died negotiating for a fully recognized independent Palestinian state with its full borders recognized. They've been given, at some point, observer status in the United Nations and so forth. But Israel doesn't care about that. It encroaches into Palestinian territory. So Israel doesn't care about international law. But when it comes to Palestine, Palestine must observe the law when they are already living in prison. The bottom line is, take the map, put the map here on the table, get Israel as it was established 75 years ago, its territory, and what it is today. It's as simple as that. So now, because the Americans and the Zionists, the racist Zionist regime, has now been woken up, they want to get the entire world to be behind them. They are the actual terrorists of Palestinian communities.
The approach, right, that has been taken so far when it comes to this conflict by the international community clearly has failed, and others are saying we need a new one that is required. What does that look like?
certainly is that the Americans have been like the principal denominator of the talks. And they are the ones that preps up Israel. They are the ones that even give military aid to Israel to continue to exist, to be this bulwark and arrogant leader in the Middle East, particularly because it's the Americans that want to extend their hegemonic presence in the Middle East and to continue to destabilize the countries of the Middle East, Syria, for instance, Lebanon, everywhere else, Iran, Iraq. All of them have been destabilized by one imperialist entity because they cannot accept the independence of the Middle East countries, because the Middle East countries have chosen their own path of development and they follow their own religion. So let the Middle East people, as free people of the world, enjoy their rights, enjoy the natural wealth of society, of their own communities, live well with their children and their future generations, without being coerced into believing in a monolithic view of the Americans, because apparently what Americans believe is the wisdom of the world.
Yeah. The 1993 Oslo Accord, what's the position of the SACP on that?
Well, the Oslo Accord, as we know, gave good hope. Possibly people believe that there will be a two-state solution in this regard, and therefore the conflict will come to an end. And certainly it didn't happen. And that is why, for instance, we have also realized the development of radicalism amongst the Palestinian people, who are realizing that all this range of talks are nothing else but empty rhetoric and promises by the international community, because they never adhere to them. And it's not the Palestinians who are breaking those agreements. On the contrary, it's Israel, supported or with almost the neglect of enforcement by the United Nations, particularly the Security Council. But the dominance of America in this regard, as the prime negotiator or following the path of negotiation, is the central problem in this regard. For the rest of the Middle East, for as long as the Americans are involved there will never be peace in the Middle East.
Why do you think Hamas has taken this particular action? I mean, it's not a conflict of equals, as you've already said. It's not a conflict between equals here. And taking this route, they should have expected, I'm sure, that this is going to be the retaliation.
Well, exactly. That's exactly what we did here. We adopted, our liberation movement established Umkhonto weSizwe. And when Umkhonto weSizwe was established, we were aware about the kind of the enemy that we're facing. The biggest military in the African continent at the time when we established this. We knew the proportionate force that was there, that were not equal to them.
Yeah.
But we had to make a choice. And that's why even in our case, we said the time comes in the life of any nation where there remain only two choices: submit or fight. The Palestinians have submitted too long, and they can't take it anymore. Unfortunately, when they can't take it anymore, their actions are such that the international community, instead of seeing the cries of the Palestinian people, continue to prep up the oppressor regime, continue to victimize the victims, condemn the victims. How do you condemn self-defense of people that are already oppressed? Their children are being killed on a daily basis, maimed on the streets, women and children. But when some of their activists respond, it's a world crisis. This is where the problem is. The inequality between the life of Palestinians and the life of Israeli people.
Yeah. So where's the give and take there? I mean, you would know in any traditional conflict resolution, you would need, I don't know, some kind of confidence building measures, some kind of give, some kind of take, some mutual back and forth in terms of steps that need to be taken now.
Withdrawal of Israel from occupied territories of Palestine, and to stop this settlement that they've been building. The bottom line is that all this kind of concessions were made by Palestinian people, particularly through the PLO. But they were making all this concession. Now Gaza is completely encircled almost by Israel, with only a small portion going into bordering Egypt. Then the rest is the sea.
Yeah.
So they can't even reach the other parts of their own country without going through Israel territory. And they are not allowed. So that's part of the problem. So there's been too much concession from the Palestinian side. But it doesn't mean that, again, international order cannot be restored in this regard towards a peaceful settlement. But the conditions of the primary condition of this, to the extent that they've provoked the Palestinian people for too long, so much that they have selflessly given themselves that either they die or they continue to live this way, is that Israel have to withdraw from Palestinian territory and end the occupation completely. Then I believe that there could be avenues for engagement.
Egypt, Turkey, can they play a role there?
Yes, of course. All these other countries can play a role, even China and other countries, Russia and so forth and so forth. But we need neutral arbitrator in this regard. The United States has not been. On the contrary, it's Israel. As we speak, it has now closed the seaside because it simply takes, when Biden says he's sending the military warships, they are already there in the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
So they simply, in the Mediterranean Pacific, they simply go there to occupy and be ready to attack. I mean, this is a siege of a people. And we can't sit down and accept these atrocities committed on the Palestinian people.
You were saying earlier on, Israel does not respect international law. Do you think they're going to carry out a land invasion now?
Yes, the way they've done it, they've said the entire Gaza territory, it's a Hamas territory, it's a war zone. Essentially, that's what they're doing, and they've started already. I mean, they are bombing that area indiscriminately. This is unacceptable, really.
Where do we, as South Africa, stand in this? Because others are saying we need to be showing solidarity with the people of Palestine, equally solidarity with those who have been killed, the children and the women and the young people this past weekend.
At the moment, the people of Gaza have no access to water. It's stopped by Israel. They have no access to electricity. They have no access to fuel. These 2.4 million people. Do you think 2.4 million people are Hamas people? That's the point. That's where solidarity needs to be given to these people that are now being turned into complete prisoners of another state in their own country of birth.
Yeah.
That's where solidarity should be going. In fact, we should be forcing the United Nations to insist on sending aid into Gaza at the moment.
As calling for a boycott here, boycott of Israel in South Africa. I don't know if that, you've done that before. Is that going to help?
Those are extra measures. They are important. Then the most urgent one is that the people that do not have access to medicine, to water, to basic needs, to food. And that's what we need to be assisting them with. But for that to happen, we don't need what the UN General Secretary was saying. He's concerned like any other person concerned. And here is the authority of the world. He should activate intervention and send the UN force there, send UN aid there. Let Israel attack UN aid. How do they allow people to live like this and allow another state to deny people access to water, really?
Do they have what did they say? The guts, I think that's the easiest word, to do that at this particular point?
Well, of course, they should have. Why do they accept these positions, for instance, if they don't have the guts? They must leave these positions if they can't take decisions. They must be able to tell the United Nations, you can't do that. That's a unilateral decision. We need a UN decision. And the UN decision should be to enforce the international law. So that's what needs to happen at the moment. But I think South Africa needs to find a way to send aid into Gaza and the West Bank, all these areas that are now being attacked, because women and children, there's nothing to feed them.
Yeah. There have been some in the country who have rejected with contempt. This is Build One South Africa statement. Build One South Africa is a new party, but its leader has been around, and you know his position on Israel. The coordinated attacks on innocent Israel civilians and the national government's failure to unequivocally condemn the massacre of women, children, and teenagers at the music festival in the Israel desert. How would you respond to that?
That's petty politicking, really. I mean, it's a completely... He's a priest. That's his problem. And part of the problem is that as a priest, they think that Israel is biblical Israel. No, this is not biblical Israel. This is not biblical war. It's the fact that Israel has been imposed as a proxy of the U.S. to occupy another country. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't understand why and I think this is a part of the confusion even within the religious community here, that they've never understood the Palestinian struggle. They think that the Palestinian struggle for self-determination and independence is an anti-Christian religion. No.
Well, the religious community we spoke to last week, they've begun to realize that.
Yes, they know that the leaders of this religious community, true leaders, they've even sent missions there. They understand these things. So that statement is it's a typical political statement that is useless, actually. It doesn't even deserve to be read in this form because it shows lack of ignorance, absolute higher level of ignorance of the tension there.
Sorry, Mapaila, let's leave it there. Appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming in. That was South African Communist Party General Secretary there.